Hello, this is Zach Brooks with World Transplant Athletes. Tips and tricks by and for transplant athletes anywhere, anytime, and online. If you have a body with a new part and you can move, you are a World Transplant Athlete. As a two-time kidney transplant recipient and frequent participant in local, national, and world transplant games and other competitions, I always wonder, how do other recipients take care of their health and prepare for competitions? Well, for me, there's only one way to find out, and that's to learn from the most inspiring transplant athletes in the world. Today, I have a really good friend of mine on the show, Justin Fulton from the United States. Justin, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Zach. Thank you so much for inviting me on.
Yeah, so Justin won't brag about himself, so I get to a little bit. I mean, Justin is probably, from the American perspective, the athlete I absolutely admire the most. I mean, he's so disciplined, he's really good, and he always motivates me to get better. I've competed against Justin multiple times in U.S. games. He's often beaten me, but just the fact that he's there and I know he's dedicated really motivates me. He's just an excellent athlete, so I had to put that in there. So, Justin, before we
Thank you
get
so
going,
much.
yeah, you're welcome. So, and I knew you wouldn't do that, so I had to. So, you sent me your tips a few weeks ago, so thank you so much for that. But before we get to that, I want people to get to know you a little bit. So, I have four warm-up questions for you. So, number one, which transplants have you had?
So I'm a kidney transplant recipient, and that goes all the way back to December of 2003. So about 17 and a half years out on a kidney transplant.
Wow, congratulations. So, question number two, if you had to summarize your entire transplant journey in one word, what would it be?
For me, the word would be fortunate. I've just felt so fortunate so many places along the way, whether that was, how well I did through dialysis, which can be miserable, whether it's the fact that I actually got a 6 for 6 antigen perfect match kidney from a deceased donor. Just so many aspects of my journey have been very fortunate. I think everyone's transplant journey is unique, and none of them are easy, but I do feel like I've definitely been fortunate with a lot of aspects of mine.
Excellent. So, question number three is, what was your first exercise post-transplant?
You know, I was thinking about this. I was another area where I was fortunate is I was actually still riding my road bike while on dialysis, waiting for my transplant. And so I was still working out some. But one of my goals when after my transplant is I wanted to get back to running. I'd actually been a collegiate runner for a couple of years before I got more sick, and uh, and so I wanted to get back to running. But I'd have to say my first exercise post transplant was actually walking,
Okay.
because it was a long process to go from walking to jogging to eventually running again, and so ramped it up. But
How long
I
did that
mean, I
take?
was pretty motivated to get
Yeah.
walking.
Yeah. How long did that take altogether? Because, you're obviously a very accomplished runner by most people's standards. So, walking, jogging, running, like give us the time frame for each of those three categories of movement for you after your transplant.
Yeah, I mean, I think walking was as soon as they'd let me out of the bed, right after the transplant.
Yeah.
I remember pushing, how you have the little pole and you're pushing around the corridor in the
Yeah.
hospital, walking the halls, doing laps. So I was trying to get up and move as soon as possible. One of the doctors had really recommended it would help after, major surgery to move some. And so I was like, sweet, I love moving. So I was trying to
Yeah.
get moving. So walking was almost immediate. But some of the other stuff I kind of had to wait for. I know they had, because of the way the incision was, and then they told me, it was like 8 weeks to drive and 12 weeks to do something else. And there was, no lifting a certain weights. And so I tried to follow kind of their guidelines. So it really was probably in that 8 to 12 week mark when I finally started jogging.
Mhm.
And really, it was probably 4 to 6 months before I would say I was actually like running again.
Yeah.
Nowhere near, obviously, the high school and collegiate level that I'd run at, but
Yeah.
was at least getting out there and going on some runs and getting a little distance.
Yeah, what's so important about your answer to me is that I'm thinking about an average Joe or Jane who, is decent fitness, gets done with their transplant. Maybe they want to exercise really quickly. I mean, you were riding your bike, you had a lifetime of athletic competition. So you even waited, 6 months until you're really starting to run again. So I think, for anyone out there, if you're like waking up today and you're in a hospital room with your transplant, put your timer on. 6 months from now, you can do that exercise you want to do, but not not much earlier in many ways. I mean, Justin's a very accomplished guy, and he took a lot of time to fully recover because your body is a very different body. So, the final
Yeah,
question. Go ahead, Jed. Yeah, go ahead, Justin, please.
I was just gonna say I was trying to keep the long term perspective on it because as much as I was antsy to get back, and one of the amazing things was with transplants is dialysis was totally wiping me out, and so in some ways I felt immediately better after the transplant, or at least had a little more mental clarity and some of that stuff. I felt like I was definitely the transplant was working. So I was a little antsy, like, but I tried to really have that long term view and just know that hey, I want to get back into this the right way and not. I knew there would probably be more negative outcomes from overdoing it than just being patient. And patience not always my strong suit, but I've been working on it for a lot of years now to just, So I knew I should build up slow.
Yeah, I understand. So the final warm up question before we get to the tips, Justin, is in which activities and sports do you regularly participate?
So running is my biggest one, but I also have done some triathlons, and so I do swim and I do ride my bike. But currently, I'm in the middle of a run streak where I'm doing at least a mile a day, and so I think this morning's run was like day 327 or something like that. And so coming up on a year now, so running is probably my biggest one that I'm doing most regularly at this point in time.
So the minimum is 1 mile per day.
Yeah, I'm averaging about 4 miles a day. I think during this past year, my longest run was like 17, and then I have days where I do just the minimum mile just to kind of qualify for the run streak.
Okay, excellent. This is awesome. So let's get right to your tips, Justin. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read them 1 through 5, and then we'll go back to the top of the list, and you can walk us through each of them. So Justin's tips are the following. So number one, it takes some time, and it's important to be consistent. You're not going to get immediate results. Number two, listen to your body as you strive to increase your abilities. Number three, allow yourself to still dream big post-transplant. Number four, fitness can help establish your healthy post life as a transplant recipient. And Justin says his numbers are actually better when he exercises more. And the final tip is have fun, find activities you enjoy, and help celebrate your new life. So let's go back to the top of the list, Justin. So why for you taking time and the consistency is it so important for you as a lifetime kidney transplant recipient?
I think part of it is, and it even goes back to that idea of trying to ramp it up slowly at the beginning and taking that longer term perspective. I think one of the things I've just realized even more so now, and I realized it obviously as a collegiate runner, is you kind of need to establish that base and that base fitness before you can really try to push yourself further. And I think consistency is probably the most important part of that. And so, I think a lot of people, they get real motivated and they want to go do just one or two really good workouts and expect to see a lot of change from it, whereas I think they'd be better doing 3 or 4 moderate workouts every week for a few weeks. And so I think we have a tendency as a society to want instant results in everything we do.
Mhm.
But I think really fitness is something that comes and is established over the long run, and I think time and consistency are important. It's not going to be immediate, so give yourself time. Take a little pressure off yourself by not working on a compressed timeline, but expecting, hey, if I really want to get to where I want to get there, I need to give myself the time to get there.
Yeah, I think this tip for me is deceptively, it's on the surface, it seems simple, but it's actually really deep. I mean, there's the long view part of it. If you give yourself a long view, it's easier to say, okay, today I'm just going to do a little bit, knowing over time you're going to do more exercise. I think that's part one of this tip. But the other part is the immediacy. So especially for people who go through life of like training and then they have a different season in life where they're doing something else, they get back to their exercise, and the tendency is to like go full out. But really, at that first time back, you have to go back to this tip number one, which is slow down, long view, consistency. I think that's this tip is on the surface it's so simple, but it has a lot of depth. So thanks for sharing this, Justin. Tip number two, you say, listen to your body as you strive to increase your abilities. Tell us about this for you.
Yeah, and I think this kind of relates back to the first one in a sense. Is if you're having that long view, you need to listen to your body, and be mindful of what you're feeling. A lot of times, especially post transplant, we could potentially be more harmful to ourselves by overdoing it instead of underdoing it and just being consistent for longer. And so I think it's just important that we listen to our body. I know for me as a runner, as a college runner, we didn't worry about hydration that much. We'd drink water before, and then we'd go run, sometimes, 15, 16, 17 miles, and then get water when we were done. Now I never do that. I carry a little handheld or a pack, vest, and carry water bottles with me, and I'm much more mindful about hydration and all that stuff. And that's been something I've just had to listen to my body for. In terms of that run streak, the recovery piece is, yeah, I'm running every day, but there are definitely days where it's just a mile or two really easy, and it's more of a recovery day than actually pushing forward day.
Mhm.
And again, I'm trying to listen to my body in that. If I ever get to the point where I feel like I'm doing damage by trying to run every day, then I'm not going to do it, right? Because I'm gonna make sure I follow this own tip of listen to my body and you know trying to be consistent over the long term instead of just totally hammering it and beating myself up in the short term, trying to get better. So
Yeah, well, I think
I think it's important. And I guess the other thing I'd say is probably the fact that just remember you're the expert on your body as a transplant recipient, right? The doctors tell us a lot of advice. I'm hopeful people are tuning into this, and I hope my tips are helpful for them. But I really want them to hear like you're the expert on you, right? And post transplant, like I think we learn we have to be advocates for ourselves when we're experiencing different things or feeling different things, and that really comes back to the idea of listening to our bodies and
Mhm.
knowing that we know best and we are the only one who is actually sensing that and experiencing that, and so we need to be mindful of that. And so yeah, I just think it's really important that we're listening to our bodies.
Yeah, what I again, this kind of tip is on the surface, it's fairly simple, but if you have a brand new body, you need to take time to get to know it. And when you've had a transplant, you do have a new body, as it were. So definitely need to get to know yourself again. So tip number three, I really love this one. Allow yourself to dream big and expect great things. So tell us about this one for you.
Yeah, I think it could be easy sometimes after going through seasons of sickness, and then as a lot of us know, getting a transplant, you feel like you have this new lease on life, but yet you also quickly realize it is a treatment, not a cure, right? Like not everything's better, and so I think it'd be easy for some to get discouraged and not expect great things or not dream big anymore. But I think it's important that we allow ourselves to still dream big and expect great things post transplant.
Mhm.
For me, I'd done a lot of things running through high school and college that were some pretty good accomplishments, and I knew post transplant I wasn't going to run. I'm never going to run that 5K time again. I'm never going to run that mile or 2 mile time again, just because those were things for a 19-year-old kid who was in excellent shape. But there are things that I've been able to dream big and set different goals. And so, for example, I've ridden some century bike rides, and I did those with the American Transplant Foundation and Team Transplant
Is
down
that
at
your,
Elephant Rock.
is that your
So I trained up. Yeah, I got a Team Transplant shirt on actually today, and so I did 100-mile bike rides. That's something I hadn't done pre-transplant. I got into triathlons. I'd never competed in triathlons. As a kid, I rode my bike all over town. I was on swim team and actually a swim coach for several years, and I was obviously running was my best sport.
yeah.
But I never put them together into a triathlon until post transplant. And then I started getting into triathlons, started with some sprints, got up to some Olympic distance, and had some success there. And what was great is I didn't have time to compare to pre transplant, right? Like they were just goals in themselves. And then also running, I've decided to go longer distances post transplant. And so while I'll never run as fast at 5K or 10K as I did in college, I signed up for a trail 50K, and just completing that, I mean, anytime you're going longer than marathon distance and stuff. So doing some ultra races. And so I just think it's important that people realize like you can still do big things and strive for things that are, that I think it's good to dream big. And for me, that's really motivating. Right. And so the fact that I'd never run that far, never ridden that far, or never put those three sports together in that way meant that I had new goals. They were different from what I was doing before my transplant. And it still let me feel like I was, succeeding and accomplishing things post transplant that I never had done pre transplant.
Yeah, what I like about your answer the most, Justin, is you said, wait a minute, I run, I swim, I cycle, I can just put these things together and like you can do a competition. Like, this sort of realization of like, peanut butter and chocolate, like I can put them together. So
Yeah.
thanks for that, Justin. So the fourth tip you have here is that fitness can help establish a healthy transplant outcome. And you said some of your best numbers have been during your regular training and exercise. Can you tell us about tip number four a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I just noticed, and I think some of the people who can relate to kidney numbers out there probably know that, we measure creatinine a lot, and it tends to sometimes slowly creep up after transplant, and just over time, you see this little bit of creep, and it makes you nervous that, obviously we're always doing our best to avoid that acute failure in the short term, but it's always a little, alarm bell in the back of your head is saying, okay, is that a sign of chronic failure over time? My kidney's not working as well.
Yeah.
And I found when I started getting in better shape in those seasons that I was training more, my numbers would come back down. And then my blood pressure would come back down. And then they'd put me on a lower dose of my blood pressure medicine, and my cholesterol numbers would be better. And just everything seemed to work better. And so we think about health in general as being good for us. But I don't think we always are mindful of the fact that it's probably specifically good for our transplants as well. And my kidney numbers have shown me that when I've been training the best, I've been able to be on lower doses of certain medicine, and have better numbers. And so my kidney works better when my whole system is working better. And so, for me, that's super motivating, to know that, that fitness can help establish those healthy transplant outcomes as well. Because, um, we, I think all transplant recipients live with a little fear in the back of their mind about rejection and
Yeah.
how long, longevity of their transplant and stuff like that. And so, anytime you can feel good about your numbers and you see fitness helping that, I think that's, for me, that's like crazy motivating, just to get me out there and keep it going.
Yeah, I mean that last part you said really struck me because there's days where I don't feel fantastic, and I say, well, if this is my last exercise, I got to get out there, So, but what I've also found over time is exactly what you found is the more I exercise, the more stable my numbers are, and in fact, that little example you shared for your personal example is really some gold for researchers and public health officials around the world. If a transplant person can stay healthier longer and cost the system less, there's a lot of benefits for society, for the individual, for healthcare system through that. So thanks for sharing that really nice tip. And the final tip you have here, Justin, is have fun and find activities you enjoy. Now, this seems, super obvious, but maybe you can tell us why this is so important for you.
I think part of it is if you find the activities you enjoy, then it's going to be easier to get out and do them. I really enjoy running every day. For me, part of this run streak is not just about the physical health aspect, but the mental health side of it is if I exercise daily, I feel better and I'm in a better place mentally, right?
Yeah.
And so part of my run streak is about that. But I enjoy running and I feel better when I am running, so it's easier for me to be motivated for it, right? For
Mhm.
me personally, I'm not big on lifting weights. Some
Mm.
people they are, so that's what they need to be doing because they'll be motivated to do it.
Yeah.
If I was felt like I was just forced into one routine or one activity that I didn't enjoy and I couldn't have fun, um, it would feel like torture to try to get out there. And I think sometimes some exercise programs feel like that for people. So yeah, I really just want to encourage people, like, find your thing. For me, I love running, and I especially love running on the trails. Living in Colorado, there's great trails and mountains and scenic stuff to go do. So part of it's the running, part of it's the getting out in nature.
Yeah.
But that's not hard for me to motivate for because I really love doing it.
Yeah.
But whatever it is for people, that'd just be my tip: is have fun, find activities you enjoy, and help celebrate your second chance at life. Because I think there's always a fine balance, right?
Mm.
Like we have this tendency to be cautious and protective a little bit of saying, hey, I've got this kidney, I got to take care of it. Like, I want to do well, I want to have longevity. But then there's also the other side of that coin where you say, but I got this second chance to live life, right? And I want to celebrate life. And one of the ways I do that is by finding the activities I love doing and getting out there and doing them. And I just encourage people, like, as a tip, is like, find your thing. Doesn't
Mm.
matter what it is, but find
Yeah.
your thing. Because the motivation and everything else, all the other tips, trying to be consistent with it, trying to take the long view, all those things tie back together when you're enjoying what you're doing.
Yeah. Well, thanks for the shout out about Colorado. So I'm from Colorado originally, so I certainly appreciate the mountains. For people outside of the United States, think of Colorado like the Alps in Switzerland or something. A lot of mountains, basically. The part about this tip that I really like is the mental part of it. I mean, just getting out and doing something. And yes, it's physically important for you, but some days physically the gains are, minimal. But usually the mental gains on a daily basis are really extraordinary. So I think that particular detail is really important, Justin. So Justin, thank you so much for being on the show today. For all audience members out there, log on to facebook.com/ World Transplant Athletes. You can also find me on Instagram World Transplant Athletes. World Transplant Athletes, tips and tricks by and for transplant athletes anywhere, anytime, and online. If you have a body with a new part and you can move, you are a world transplant athlete. Justin, thank you so much today.
Thanks for having me on, Zach.